Thank you, Matt. Good morning. It's wonderful to be here. A few words about Vivid Cortex. We provide really detailed visibility into databases at scale, monitoring and observability without overhead. And as you may know, I'm no longer the CEO. I was the founding CEO and served as the CEO for about 6 years. And we now have a new CEO, Amina Ali, and she's doing a wonderful job. The business is growing strong, and our customers are really happy with us. We have phenomenal retention numbers and phenomenal expansion numbers, and those really speak to the value of the product, because people don't keep and expand a product unless they're getting a lot of value out of it. And Amina deserves a lot of credit for that. So Amina, I don't know if you're somewhere where people can, I'm actually not quite sure where she is right now, but anyway. And that brings me to why I'm here today and my renewed focus in the business, which is I'm able to get out of the types of tax and finances and budgets and things like that that Eero was just speaking about, and re-engage with customers, think more about product, think more about the community. And one of the projects that I've focused on a little bit more recently is an ebook that's free to download. I'll give you a QR code for that later, called DevOps for the Database. And it's about 65 pages of contributions from many, many folks, talking about how folks who apply DevOps principles and practices to the database outperform, not just with regards to the database, but in terms of engineering and delivering product to market, and ultimately their business performance overall. So let's take a little bit of a tour through the DevOps for the database and explore a little bit more what that means. And I'll begin by telling a story of a company that I was somewhat familiar with, not intimately familiar, but knew folks who worked there and had a lot of secondhand conversations about what was going on. It was a high-flying startup, in a very hotly contested space. Investors were pouring money into this marketplace because it was pretty clear that there was going to be a winner-take-all situation, and it was really big. And as they raised a lot of money, expanded their team, expanded their customer base very rapidly. And ultimately, of course, it's a very data-driven business, and that meant that they had to scale their data infrastructure very rapidly under a lot of stress. And there's essentially a fork in the road. I've been involved with many, many companies scaling their data infrastructure, and eventually they all come to a fork in the road where they have to decide how they're going to do that, and really at the team organizational level, how they're going to do that. In this case, this company felt that their developers were a hazard to the database, more or less, and that they really needed to isolate the database and protect it against the influence of the developers. So they kind of doubled down on the model of team structure where the database administrators and operations folks own and guard the database and keep all of those developers with their risky lack of knowledge about the database and so forth away from the database. So they kind of built a walled garden or a silo around the database and chose to try and scale it in that direction. As the slide might give you a hint, this didn't ultimately go very well. They lost in the marketplace, and I think a lot of that was due to the engineering dysfunction that evolved from this decision around how they organized their data team and the rest of their teams, and just in terms of delivering product to market. And it's more than just the data. It's more than just the organization of the DBA team. But I've seen it play a really major contributing role in either success or not success several times. And this is kind of an archetypal story that I've seen played out over and over again. So as I've, not only when I was at Percona, but even before Percona, and then in the years since then, I've seen, as I said, I've seen this story repeat itself many times. And it didn't occur to me until fairly recently that as I was trying to describe these patterns and what was successful and what was not successful to people, I was struggling to find the terminology for it. And last year, the light bulb came on, thanks to somebody who was coaching me for a talk that I eventually gave. at QCon San Francisco, which is the first time that I suddenly realized that we're actually talking about DevOps. You know, this whole time, everything that I've been saying is very successful about how to build and scale and manage teams and data infrastructure and so forth, is all about what is successful. You know, those are DevOps practices and principles and cultural attributes. So, so what does it mean to apply DevOps to the database? First of all, it's interesting to note that there is kind of a fallacy. There's what's called the iron triangle, that you can have faster, you can have better or cheaper, pick two, but you can't have all three. The reality is, and there's really great research to support this, that you actually can have all three. That applying DevOps principles, practices, culture for anywhere in your organization, whether it's in the technical team or even at the business level, actually does create all three advantages. And so it's a fallacy that you can only have two out of the three. And the best research on this comes from Dr. Nicole Forsgren and her co-authors in the book Accelerate and in the DevOps research assessment that is now part of the Google Cloud. So let's look at a few of the characteristics of this. What does it mean to apply DevOps to a social technical system? There are three core ways of DevOps. The first one is systems thinking, which means that you look at a system overall and you don't micro-optimize a part of it. You optimize for the overall system and you don't get stuck in like a local maximum. If we think back to the original story that I was telling, this team was focusing on how can we optimize what we believe operationally is best for the databases. And what they were missing was that they were throwing barriers in the way of the engineering organization getting things done. So they might have been optimizing a small part of their company and their teams, but they were de-optimizing the overall. So that is one of the three ways of DevOps, is systems thinking. The second is feedback loops, because you can't optimize things unless you are actually experimenting, observing the results of those experiments, and then applying that. And that brings to the third way of DevOps, which is continuous learning. So you take these three things and you put them together and you get flow and throughput, you get feedback loops, and then you get continuous small iterations within, which is why I chose this image as the cover of the DevOps for the ebook. DevOps for the database ebook, because we've got big loops and we've got small loops within them. And it's got a lot of energy. And all of this is based on sound theory and research, which goes well outside of technology. It goes into finance, goes into operations research. There's a whole body of work and literature spanning decades and continually improving our understanding of why these things actually do produce better results. So ultimately, it kind of comes down to analysis of the dependencies and variations in systems and how they do work, leading to understanding, a profound understanding of how that work flows through a system, whether it's technical or human system, and analysis of bottlenecks and how to improve them. This goes all the way back to Toyota, for example. And it ties out of pure DevOps into other realms as well. Site reliability engineering, coming out of Google and now very broadly adopted all over the place, talks about things like eliminating toil. Toil is unproductive work and rework that keeps you working in the system instead of on the system. And that is the type of principle, and in fact, that's the type of outcome of applying DevOps as well. Another really important thing is to align responsibility and authority. And this is very near and dear to my heart, because whenever you have a situation where somebody is responsible for something that they can't control, over which they don't have authority, then you have a recipe for dysfunction. And a great example of this, specific to the database, would be making the database administrator responsible for query performance and database performance. They don't control what queries come to the database. So if you make them responsible for something that they can't control, they end up in madness. They end up being completely reactive all the time, always scrambling to try and fix something that is ostensibly not the person's job to fix who actually caused the problem, which would be developers. And that's not to criticize developers. It's to point out that the responsibility should be where the control is. And so that's a really core principle and outcome of DevOps as well. And then finally, and this is something that I really founded VividCortex to do in part, is democratizing visibility and creating autonomy across large teams of people. So, for example, at Vivid Cortex, we have a product that is designed and is very successful at helping everybody in the engineering team understand what the database is doing, not just the database administrator. And a common story for us is a customer, a new customer, initially often has a handful of people who are responsible for database performance, and they're the only ones who can see database performance. And soon after that, we're able to spread that to the entire engineering team, and everybody gets the benefit of that. So this is like DevOps across the engineering team, and indeed even across the business, not specific to the database. And when we look at it in the context of the database, what does that look like? I'm not going to read the words off the slide to you, but in collecting information, stories, case studies from lots and lots of people, which I consolidated into that ebook, a few capabilities kind of really jumped out at me. And you can think of them a few different ways. In fact, on another slide, I'm going to show you a simpler way to look at this as well. But these capabilities are things that companies, teams, organizations, individuals are able to do. So they're able to automate their infrastructure with code, with Chef, Puppet, and so forth and so on. In traditional DevOps, outside of the database, often this is what people think of as DevOps. Oh, I got Puppet and Chef, you know, everything is repeatable and automated, so we've got DevOps. It's an initial practice, and DevOps is not a destination that you arrive at. It's a journey of continual improvement. So that is one of those initial practices that's very valuable, but then hopefully gets built upon with other things like continuous delivery and so forth and so on. When you bring this into the database, which is usually, in my opinion, an observation, the last place that DevOps really gets applied, there are lots of companies that are doing DevOps great everywhere except for the database, and now they're starting to apply DevOps to their database. But when you bring these things to the database, a couple of database-specific things come up. Some of these just have to be applied in a particular way because of the particularities of database technology and the fact that it's stateful and things like that. Other things, for example, schema management is really important, and you don't have such a thing outside of database operations. Towards the end of these practices, these capabilities are a pair of things: developer responsibility and DBA empowerment. And those things go together. That's about that responsibility authority pairing that I think is so important to align carefully together. And without one of these, you don't get the other. So without developer responsibility for their application's performance of the calls against the database, you don't get empowered DBAs, you get reactive DBAs, right? I'm a DBA. I had a pretty significant career as a DBA, not a DBA anymore, but had a pretty significant career as a DBA and as a developer. And I feel this stuff really deeply. I've lived it. Another way to look at this is Mikey Dickerson's hierarchy of needs. You may know Mikey Dickerson as the site reliability engineer who took leave of absence from Google to work on healthcare.gov. And the first thing that he did when he got there was help people understand why healthcare.gov was failing so badly. And there was a hierarchy of needs. I've copy-pasted his diagram. That's actually a Google diagram that's freely available on the web. It's also, under slightly different wording, incorporated in the SRE book, where the platform on the bottom is labeled monitoring and not visibility, observability. I don't care what terms you use. The point is we have to be able to see and understand how our systems are behaving in order to really start to build a platform for moving fast. And you'll see, if you look up the triangle, you'll see that we've got to understand how our systems are behaving. Then we've got to get things like incident response and postmortems and root cause analysis. That's that learning. That's that third way of DevOps, continuous learning. And you build the capability to create product and then deliver it. And ultimately, that's the outcome of this. But you've got to do the foundational work before you can really move fast. Now, if you look on the left, you'll see that holistic observability is number 4. Why isn't it number 1 if it's the foundation of our reliability needs? Well, on the left, I'm not telling you the priority that I assign to things. I'm telling you the progression that I see people usually do this. If I were to have my way, I would put observability monitoring at number 1 instead of number 4. But this is the order in which I usually see this actually happen. If you put observability and monitoring at step number 1 instead of number 4, you would see things like better success and faster velocity, getting continuous delivery working, automation, decoupling, all of those kinds of things would go faster with better monitoring. And as we engage in our customer base, not only with the people who are actually running the databases, DBAs, and the people who are writing queries against the databases, the developers, application engineers, we also engage at a strategic level with a lot of our customers in the leadership ranks. And there are 3 common things that we see coming out again and again, the core pillars of their sort of long-term 3 to 5 year to 10-year view of where they think technology, the macro trends, and their business in particular is going and what success looks like for them. So one of those is database hosting and technology migrations. This could look like moving from a proprietary database to an open source database, or moving from on-prem to the cloud, or both. But the point is that things are changing. The workloads are being run in different places. The data is moving from place to place. And how to navigate that successfully is a core concern for many of these businesses, because every business is becoming increasingly data-driven, and we're all data companies now. And so where that data lives and how it's accessed and how it performs is super important strategically for these companies. The next one is digital transformation and DevOps. And obviously, this is a talk about DevOps. Digital transformation is basically the business, it's like the Forbes buzzword for DevOps at the executive level. So it's pretty much the same thing. And this is, again, kind of a core concern for and strategic plank for a lot of these companies. And then there's user experience and application performance. As digital businesses, our customers have increasingly high expectations of responsiveness, availability, consistency, and performance, and a great user experience. That's, for example, one of the things that we've built into Vivid Cortex is a great user experience, because developers don't tolerate crappy tools, right? So if we want developers to adopt our tool, if we want it to be the entire engineering team, then it has to perform and have a great design. So if you're interested in how to adopt DevOps, I have kind of high-level thinking points here and much more detailed in the book, and lots of references to case studies of those who have done it one way or another. My sort of 3 steps to boil this down the most simply possible is let's put out the fires and stop the unplanned work, invisible work, and the rework that's keep us from actually making progress and shipping product to market. Make sure that you don't regress. So put steps in place to keep things from backsliding. And finally, use that as the platform to improve your production capacity so that you can really start delivering product to market and outpacing the competition. All 3 of these things require detailed observability, which is the mission of our company, and the mission of Vivid Cortex is to help people to understand. For example, put out the fires. Well, first we have to find the fires. We've got to measure to do that, right? How do we keep from regressing? Well, we've got before and after measurements. So all of these rely on observability. And then finally, what you get by doing all of these things is a lot more speed in the marketplace. And to tell another story that is the pair to the first story that I told, the other company that was leading in that particular market, it was a winner-take-all situation, and they did sweep the marketplace. In fact, they acquired the first company and combined them together. And this is not the only time I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen many, many times over the course of my career. So speed, which is built on the benefits that you get from DevOps, digital transformation, and ultimately those 3 core DevOps principles, is really what enables companies to outperform both in shipping product as well as in business results. You can come find us at booth 105, and we can talk about how Vivid Cortex is designed to support all of these things. The book in the middle is the free ebook download, and if you want to, sorry, I guess my QR code is not there, but you can download that from vividcortex.com or pick up a copy and look at a physical hard copy of it at our booth. Thank you.
Thank you very much.